Welcome to this episode of Stanford Medicine X Live for Tuesday, June 17th, 2014. This program is a weekly live recorded broadcast and tweet chat from the organizers of Stanford Medicine X, a conference that explores the intersection of emerging technology and medicine. The views and opinions expressed in this broadcast are those of the individual participants and not necessarily those of the Stanford University School of Medicine or the conference organizers. If you are joining us for the first time, a quick reminder that there's a simultaneous conversation happening on Twitter right now using the hashtag MedX. We will be taking questions from social media tonight, so make sure to start up your Twitter client to join in the online conversation and interact with today's speakers. Please also make sure to like our YouTube page at www.youtube.com/Stanford Medicine X. We also wish to remind you that registration for Medicine X 2014 is now open. Don't miss the year's premier patient-centered conference on emerging technology and medicine. Unique opportunities such as our masterclass program and our IDEO Design Challenge workshop have extremely limited space availability. You'll want to make sure to take advantage of these programs while our regular registration pricing is still available until August 1st, 2014. Please note you are watching a live online program and there is a delay between real-time events and the live stream you are watching. Tweets from our in-studio guests will appear before you see the real-time events they are tweeting about unfold on the video live stream. The topic for today's program for June 17, 2014 is ePatient Leadership, the Celebrity ePatient. Joining us today is an exciting group of ePatient leaders. The goal of this program is to hear from them, have them share with us their views on these issues, and of course to answer your questions out there from our viewing audience on Twitter.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the MedX Live edition about celebrity and e-patients. We've got a really fantastic group with us tonight, and a rather large group, which I'm glad to see. So let's just take a moment to introduce our panelists. Hugo Campos is an e-patient on a quest for access to the data collected by his implantable cardiac defibrillator. He is passionate about connected health and serves as a member of the Medicine X ePatient Advisory Board. Rachel Crooks is a 21-year-old student and e-patient with myasthenia gravis. She attends the University of Calgary studying biological sciences and aspires to become a physician. She is a 2014 Medicine X ePatient delegate. Matthew Sharon is a lawyer and patient advocate with a particular interest in invisible illness who says that he's bad at brief biographies, but he's also a 2014 Medicine X ePatient delegate. Robert West is a SUNY Upstate Emeritus Professor turned blogger and Uber patient advocate. Distilling 30 years of experience as scientist, medical educator, and patient into practical approaches towards healthcare remediation via social media venues. Tiffany Peterson is an e-patient champion for health and lupus awareness through the powers of social media. She is constantly utilizing innovative skills to connect, educate, and empower lupus patients and their supporters worldwide. Britt Johnson, aka the Hurt Blogger, lives with 2 forms of autoimmune arthritis and complex migraines. She is an e-patient consultant working to create patient-centered design in healthcare and technology. She writes on the absurdity of living with chronic disease and is a member of the Medicine X ePatient Advisory Board. Lisa Bernstein is a 3-time cancer survivor and Medicine X ePatient Advisory Board member. She will be participating in the IDEO Design Challenge this year at MedX and will be moderating our Twitter conversation tonight during the Hangout at It's the Bunk and using the hashtag MedX. And finally, I am Sarah Kaczarski, perhaps better known as Afternoon Napper. I am, among many things, a stroke and aneurysm survivor, a one-kidney wonder, a fibromuscular dysplasia patient, and founder of FMD Chat, a peer-to-peer support organization that uses social media to connect patients around the world. I also serve on the MedX ePatient Advisory Board. So The topic that we'll be discussing tonight is the concept of celebrity among e-patients and how this can be both an advantage and a detractor. And so first, what I'd like to do is hear from our panelists sort of which patient advocates you consider to be either celebrities or perhaps more simply just e-patients of note. And Robert, I would like to send this over to you first. Who do you think is someone that we should really be paying attention to, or that people are already paying a lot of attention to?
In terms of an e-patient?
Yeah.
Well, my favorite, for starters, was Kelly Young, who's known as RA Warrior. I taught a course in personalized medicine. It involved a lot of social media in that, and it became clear immediately that she was very much on top of, the business of rheumatoid arthritis, which is the disease she suffers from. And I felt she set the gold standard for patient advocacy, e-patient behavior, in terms of digging into the literature and finding out what was going on with her disease. And it was important because in teaching medical students for 30 years, they're not used to empowered patients. And so the elective that I taught was to bring in the concept of the empowered patient and patient advocacy. And it's important particularly because some e-patients are actually far more educated, certainly about their diseases, than their own physicians are. That's a hard bullet to bite for the physicians who've sunk in many years into their training, but this is the new reality today, and hopefully this will become part of the training of doctors tomorrow.
And I want to throw this now over to Nisha, who I unfortunately left out of our introduction, so I apologize. Nisha Pradhan is a biology student at Rosemont College and a future physician passionate about patient-centered health, medical education, and innovative medicine. As a future physician, she hopes to bridge the gap between invisible and visible illnesses, improve participatory medicine through healthcare and social media, and further open access in healthcare through innovative medicine. She is one of our 2014 Medicine X e-patient delegates. And so, Nisha, tell me, who are some of the voices that you're really paying attention to? Oh, wait, we need to get you unmuted there for a second. Nisha, we'll come back to you here in just a second. Britt, let's sling it over your way.
So I would agree with what Robert said, and I think that's just because we are in the same kind of disease community there. I definitely look to Kelly Young of RA Warrior. Before that, also really look to Seth Ginsburg as well, who founded Creaky Joints. He was sort of the first real e-patient for me that, that was before the term was even being used. He was an e-patient before there was an e-patient term. And he started Creaky Joints very early on, and that was a place that really helped me find community, helped me find reliable resources, which I think, is what Robert was saying, reliable resources, reliable people to talk to, and just kind of a reliable voice in the community. So for me, that was kind of the first real big e-patient that I've looked up to and I've continued to. And then, on the whole, I'd say, in our arthritis community as well, there's RA guy as well, who's, a very reliable source and good there. So, there's a lot kind of already in my community, but there's a lot of other e-patients I look to as well, including yourself, Sarah. So I know that'll make you blush, but it's the truth. So.
Well, a shout out real quick to some of all the wonderful people who are joining us on Twitter. I'm getting reports that we've got too many to even mention them all, which is fabulous, so thank you. But Meredith Gould, Primary Immune, LA Lupus Lady, Carly RM, and Telephonoscope, thank you for being here, and hopefully we'll get some questions from all of the group. Nisha, let's come back over to you and see if we can hear from you this time. Oh, there we go. Yes. Oh, yes.
Hi everyone, sorry about that. Actually, there I am. Actually, what Britt said was exactly what I was going to say. One of the big reasons I got involved in the first place was after seeing that there were a bunch of other ePatients out there, like you, Sarah, who were not afraid of the consequences. There are no consequences, and decided to go ahead and make their voice heard.
And I think that's a great point of kind of bringing up these consequences issue. And Matthew, I'd actually like to hear from you about that, because you're someone who has, as a lawyer, has definitely this very, very professional occupation. So how has the ePatient voice and these ePatients of note played into your decision to be an ePatient and be vocal about it, and who are you listening to? Oh, we've got you on mute too. There we go. There we go.
I think for me, recently the biggest consequence has been death threats, actually, which is not something I'd ever had the pleasure of experiencing before. So that was new and interesting in an incredibly bad way. And that was on a social media platform. That was on Reddit, actually. And so I stepped back from Reddit for a while. It's a community where there's not heavy moderation, and I actually went through my post history and just started deleting stuff that could lead to quote-unquote doxing, which is taking a pseudonym and turning it into a real-life identity from overzealous or even normally zealous other users. So it's been something that's been on my mind lately, and I don't have a good answer, unfortunately. I think there's a certain amount of risk that I've assumed by speaking publicly about normally private topics, and topics that for some people can understandably be quite emotional and I guess triggering. Professionally, I really like the work of someone who has since passed on, named Jennifer Jaff, who was an attorney who her charity is now named after her. It's the Jennifer Jaff Center. It used to be, I think, Advocacy for Patients with Chronic Illnesses, who was just relentless blogger, and who I sort of learned about this world from her WordPress blog, I think.
I'm actually familiar with Jennifer's work, and she has been a very, very influential voice in the field. Rachel, tell me about you and approaching this as a future physician. Who are some of the voices that you're really looking to? Oh, Rachel, there we go. Okay. Awesome.
Some of the voices that I really look to are really ePatients that are, like I found kind of a group of people who are ePatients and also people moving into, like, working in healthcare, people like Chronic Curve or Little A on Twitter. So people who are really facing, they're kind of have one foot in both worlds. They have the ePatient view and then also the healthcare provider view. So I think those are the people that I am kind of following right now.
And Tiffany, what about you? Who are you looking to these days? Are we
okay?
Here?
Okay. When I first came online looking for support, the first person I found was actually LA Lupus Lady. And then shortly after that, I found ePatient Dave and Regina Holiday. and they were just really making their voices public about health and advocacy. And I found social media being a great point for us patients, especially for those of us who can't be active physically. It's a great way for us to be more involved in our communities and other health communities, and just really put ourselves out there so that we can spread information out to other patients.
Hugo, who have been some of your influential leaders?
No, without any doubt, number one, I think it has been ePatient Dave. Excuse me, particularly because his message resonated directly with what I was trying to do in sort of trying to gain access to health data, and that was essentially what he was talking about, and I thought, wow, I want to be like that guy. That this is the right message, and I think through Dave, I sort of got exposed to all of these amazing people who are members and in the positions of driving the Society for Participatory Medicine, and I don't want to mention any particular names because the list is so humongous, and I will certainly forget somebody. But there are many incredible people who are, many of you are here today, who are part of the Society for Participatory Medicine, and that's just the listserv itself has been incredibly useful, and so yeah, and I also do follow. There are some physicians, and I think it's kind of important to mention too, in the area that I'm interested in, which is cardiac electrophysiology, who blog and who are active on Twitter, and I follow those folks as well, and I find that very useful, and that's sort of trying to drive a dialogue, and anyway, so it's essentially the beginning for me, however, has been ePatient Dave.
So I want to transition into how we can potentially use some of this name recognition and notoriety to advance causes. There are certainly patients out there who are very strongly associated with one particular disease or one particular cause. And I know in my own experience, while I am a rare disease patient, this fibromuscular dysplasia patient, at the same time, I haven't wanted to be entirely pigeonholed because there are all these other diagnoses that actually apply to me. But at the same time, being able to amplify any kind of acknowledgement for FMD has just been a really wonderful bonus, because, I mean, anybody with any kind of rare disease knows that we don't get no attention. So, yeah. But I'd actually, Britt, would like to hear from you about this, because with arthritis, autoimmune arthritis, that's a fairly recognizable topic. How do you feel that your individual brand has amplified your cause?
Well, I can tell you I have more motivation today. For those who haven't seen on my Twitter feed, now all of my siblings have been diagnosed with a form of arthritis as of today, which was a little shocking and disheartening for me, but not shocking at the same time because I know these people. So that empowers me to work even harder because it hits even closer to home now. But for me, it's interesting having such a large community. You know, and Sarah and you and I have talked about this, the difference between kind of rare disease communities that are smaller. For a long time, I felt like I was in that subset of a rare disease community. You know, with the spondylitis that I have, so the spondylitis community and the ankylosing spondylitis community and so forth. You know, it's a little tougher for those smaller groups to gain traction like that, especially when you're talking about a large group of patients, you know, where we're talking millions of patients in this country that have arthritis. And so in a way, I found it funny that when, you know, having had a form of spondylitis since childhood, and then I was dually diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis 2 years ago, I was almost able to amplify my cause a little more for spondylitis and kind of get people to understand what that is a little bit specifically, and not just arthritis. Because once I started putting rheumatoid arthritis out there, people started connecting with me a little more. It was really kind of interesting, even though I was using some of the same hashtags. I don't know if it offered a better connection to a broader community, and that was it. But it allows me to bring kind of these rarer forms of arthritis more to the forefront of the arthritis conversation as well, because of these certain diseases that are more prominent and so forth. And I think too, I go through bouts where I feel like, because of maybe whatever is happening in the patient community at the time, I feel the need to just be a patient first and maybe not an arthritis advocate first. And then there's sometimes, like today, I feel the need to be an arthritis advocate first and then, just kind of a patient advocate second, because we do deal with so many of the similar topics. But yeah, I think it's been an interesting journey, kind of, being an advocate and then having my diagnosis change, which I think will still be evolving along the way. So I have a tough time answering that, because I think I've been able to bring the rarer forms of arthritis a little bit more to the conversation, but it's still something that we struggle with in such a big community. So.
Tiffany, you are so strongly associated with lupus, and actually a little bit of the conversation that we had before tonight's panel was how you wanted to make sure that you're mentioned as an ePatient advocate and not just solely lupus. So how do you feel that your voice has helped amplify awareness of lupus, but has that at all detracted from the other things you're interested in?
I started out talking about lupus roughly about 4 years ago, when I was first diagnosed, and that was my main focus because I didn't know anything else at the point. And after hearing a lot from ePatient Dave and Regina, and seeing how they kept on bringing up the fact that so many of us have similar barriers in the health community, what prevents one specific disease from getting into contact with another happens to be the issues between conversations between doctors and patients, or patients and pharma. We all have these barriers. So it kind of made me broaden up my horizons to speak on health advocacy, because what prohibits one disease specific also prohibits another. So I kind of have realized that opening up into other conversations, and I've also joined up into the breast cancer community and the diabetes community, also have great chats going on online. And I've learned from each of these different communities. So I think it's really important for us to, break out of the silos and pretty much join together so that we can improve healthcare for all of us, not just one specific disease.
I love your mention of these other chats, because yeah, it's amazing what you can learn from what are theoretically disease-specific chats, but their content is so incredibly rich, like the breast cancer, like the diabetes. I mean, the end of life, the hospice palliative medicine, like all these chats have absolutely taught me something. Hugo, what about you? How do you feel about this? Are you with me? There
yeah, sorry. There you go. So, do you mind rephrasing the question? I was thinking. Rephrase it for me, please, if you will, Sarah.
Yeah. No. So well, with Hugo, with you, we know right. Hugo, and this quest for data access, and that these things have become synonymous in a way, and so. Has your notoriety helped further this push for data access movement as a whole?
Mm-hmm. Right. So I think we all have the responsibility to add to the conversation. I don't think that any individual person will. It's a movement, right? We're all a part of a movement. And so I don't take responsibility for changing anything or being able to make any significant difference. But in the current situation of things. But I think what is helpful. I think it's for all of us. Once you add your voice to the chorus, I suppose, where you're amplifying the voice and you're amplifying the message. So I feel a certain responsibility on that regard. But again, sometimes I am. I don't think any single person alone can change culture. What we're trying to do here is change culture. I'm not sure if that answers the question, but that's sort of how I feel about it.
Now, Nisha, you have come to us as an ePatient delegate this year with what I have to say is a diagnosis that I was not previously aware of. And so I've really been interested in learning about this. And I want to pose this question to you of, have other voices that are perhaps more well known, have they at all made it harder for you to become an advocate? And also, drawing on your background in PR, tagging on a question that's actually come from Catherine Blotter from our Twitter feed of how have you gained traction for your disease on social media platforms and reached more patients?
To answer that in a short way, I haven't. To be very honest, I really haven't yet. Congenital anosmia in itself, is a very, very rare condition, and just like many of the other rare diseases out there, of course, but the fact remains that there is no ePatient out there, well, myself excluded, that has gained notoriety yet. There's just no one out there making a voice for anosmia yet. So I'm trying to pave that path right now, but as of yet, I haven't gained that notoriety and traction yet.
Robert, what do you think? I mean, you've been in this space for a while. Do you think that there are voices out there, advocate voices out there, that simply by virtue of their strength, that they make it harder for other patients to really carve a niche out for themselves?
I have not seen that myself. Maybe because I've been talking too much and not listening enough, but I haven't seen it. To me, social media has been a godsend in terms of communication and advocacy. It's a different world today than it was. I'm older than most of the panelists. It is so nice by comparison to what I grew up with. I just think it's fantastic. And no, the only negative experience I've had, if this is part of an answer to your question, is I was cornered by a troll once, maybe early on, 3 years ago or so. It happened to be an MD at that time who resented a patient actually discussing disease on social media like he knew what he was talking about. And but that was one experience. I've been on Twitter for 4 years, and that's the only negative experience I've had. So I haven't had any other interference with myself in terms of getting the message out, really.
Rachel, do you find that the environment is any different in Canada, or is it still that the universality of these voices in social media, does it matter about location? Or, I mean, have you seen this phenomenon of other voices maybe drowning out smaller voices?
I think in Canada, it's still pretty open, I would say. You know, I'd say the situation is fairly similar to the U.S. just because social media is so pervasive, and it's pretty similar in most places. I think the place where it does differ is in like policy discussions and that kind of thing. But for the most part, I think ePatients have a very similar voice here in Canada as they do in the U.S. And as for the patients, kind of like more notorious patients kind of drowning each other out, I haven't really seen that too much. I find the ePatient community as a whole to be very inclusive, and if anything, the well-known ePatients are very happy to help out kind of the other ePatients that are just getting started.
Matthew, is it any different at all for you in your experience in the Crohn's community?
It's not really with the Crohn's community. I think there's enough space for individuals to be heard. When groups, though, like CCFA, the Crohn's and Colitis Foundation of America, take a position that maybe isn't that well considered, that can be really troubling. So especially when you're dealing with bureaucracy and things like FDA rulemaking. But at the same time, having a number of e-patients or just involved patients, whether or not they've ever been on social media, is something that's doable now. It's possible to mobilize people to say, hey, can you write the FDA and tell them that this is a phenomenally bad idea that will hurt patients, and so that they're actually now getting a broader perspective of voices because of the internet, even if they're not getting those voices over the internet.
And Britt, I want to ask you this question playing off a little bit of a comment that's come in from Sherry Reynolds, who's at Cascadia on Twitter, about mentioning the risk of, quote, token spokespeople, that they're, that it may not necessarily be that these voices are drowning out smaller voices, but that perhaps it's sort of the same people who get sent to conferences or who become the voices or anything. What have you seen, and is this at all something that happens in arthritis or the e-patient community in general?
I think I would just speak to the e-patient community in general. She brings up the exact point that I was thinking. There's a big difference between sort of patient celebrity within the patient support community and how the rest of the medical community views those celebrity patients. And I think that's what we really need to kind of touch on a little bit. On the whole, I feel like, the quote-unquote celebrity patient, or, patients, e-patients that are more, have more notoriety, are either, a lot of times they're either busier to get to some people, and it's tough for people coming in to realize that they may be working on other projects and that they can't respond right away, and that's tough for newcomers to realize. So in that instance, it's kind of helpful for the entire community to come together and say, hey, we can all help, which is the truth. It shouldn't be just to one person to just provide the support for all of that. And like everyone was saying, I feel like on the whole, there's not really a problem patient to patient within the community. There's no real egos at that point, and everybody's just really helpful, I feel like. The issue that I find is with conferences, like you're saying, or with other healthcare groups, because, I know, and this is going to sound really weird coming from me, because some people view me as a celebrity patient. I mean, that's what I was told this last weekend at the conference I was at. I don't feel that way a lot of times. I'm just me. But the difference is how, say, pharma or these other healthcare conferences view it. When they look for a patient representative, they usually don't dig too deep, and so they only come across a handful of kind of token spokesperson or spokespeople that may or may not be representing the entire patient community. And to me, that's not good, because those people are stretching themselves far too thin. Their expertise may be only in one area, one disease area. They may have had a certain kind of expertise within a hospital system, or they may be housebound, and that may be their expertise. And I think the important thing is, as kind of e-patient leaders, is to raise up some of these less heard voices. And I think it's a responsibility of, kind of e-patient leaders to bring up some of these other voices, because inherently every single story has the ability to affect change, and the uniqueness of their story has the ability to affect change. And I would like to see some of these smaller voices come up. And the problem is, when I talk to other conferences or groups, that I'm attempting to work with, I try to bring in, and say, hey, you should really look at this blogger, you should really look at that blogger. And a lot of times it's really met with, well, they don't have that big of a following, or they don't have this, which really isn't good, because their voice is just as powerful on there. And we need to get better about, as a patient community, about finding a way to kind of have multiple representatives and not just have one or two people speak for all patients and all e-patients. You know, and there is a little difference there between, you know, the entire e-patient group and disease-specific communities. So, you know, it's a little bit of a balance. So we're good to each other, but we need to figure out how to get more of those voices out there to others to help them understand the intricacies of various diseases. So.
Well, talking about getting more voices out there, I do want to do one quick shout out to Twitter. Thank you to all of you who are joining us, and we are enjoying your questions and your comments, so please keep those coming. We're going to roll into a promo briefly, and we'll be back after these messages from Medicine X.
Let's take a quick break to remind those of you just joining us for this episode of Stanford Medicine X Live that we are here with a panel of e-patients discussing the topic e-patient leadership, the celebrity e-patient. This program is made possible by the Stanford University School of Medicine, Department of Anesthesia, Stanford AIM Lab, Stanford Hospital and Clinics, and the Agency for Healthcare Research and Quality. Time to take a shout out to Twitter. If you are following this conversation online or on Twitter, Lisa Bernstein, also known as It's the Bunk, is moderating the Twitter discussion on the MedX hashtag. We have with us today a panel of influential e-patients. E-patients and caregivers out there, what questions do you have for our panelists today? What do you think of the term celebrity e-patient? What does that mean to you? What qualities do e-patient leaders have in common? And who has influenced you and how you conduct your e-patient advocacy in social media? Healthcare providers, technologists, and researchers out there, how can you connect with e-patients to better advance your cause? Whose e-patient leadership example do you follow? Tweet us your questions or responses, and we'll do our best to have the panel address them during this episode of Stanford Medicine X Live for Tuesday, June 17th, 2014.
So welcome back, and I want to kick this question over to Hugo about, we've talked a little bit about this kind of idea of uniting and having a responsibility to one another as e-patients. Do you believe that e-patients of note have a responsibility to raise up other e-patient voices, like those of e-patients who have perhaps a larger following, who have a more vocal voice? Like, what could they do to maybe help Nisha get a little bit more traction for her community?
Right. I do think that we all have the responsibility to help other e-patients who don't have perhaps a loud voice yet. It's not a competition. It's not a race. It's really, again, it's like it's a movement. And a lot of times I see this happening a lot among disease nonprofit organizations. It's very sad a lot of times in nonprofit organizations. A lot of times, particularly those who compete for the same sources of funding, and they compete, and I think it does a disservice to the cause. And so you know, I think we have to make, as e-patients, we have to make an effort to elevate the voices of other e-patients, and if we really want to turn this into a movement and really reach tipping point. So there's no other way around it. And those folks, it's a fine line a lot of times. You know, if you're trying to make a career out of health advocacy, a lot of times people are competing for spots in a limited number of spots at a conference, or perhaps you know, and so it does become it can become a little competitive. But I think if you're advocating for a cause, and if you're if your cause is purely altruistic, you're really trying to improve healthcare and trying to empower people, you really have to put those selfish feelings aside, I think.
Rachel, tell me a little bit about this in the context of med ed. Like, in terms of teaching, we like to pass on knowledge to our students. In terms of being an e-patient leader, what can we do to help raise other e-patient voices?
I think in terms of med ed, it's really important for both e-patients that are well known, or even if they're not well known, like to really try and make their way into the med ed circles, like on Twitter using the med ed hashtag, or educating themselves about how med ed kind of works, and also for providers to also reach out to patients. I think that's a little slower happening. I think patients are usually a little more proactive at moving, kind of squeezing themselves into discussions about healthcare. But hopefully, as more healthcare providers kind of become more aware about e-patients, they will also try and reach out and include patients in the medical education.
So one thing that has been an issue for me, if I had chosen to make stroke advocacy my main little drum that I beat, frankly, that probably would have been a lot easier of a row to hoe, because people are so much more familiar with it, and there are very famous people, whether they have suffered a stroke or not, there are very famous people who have lent their voice to the cause of raising stroke awareness. And with lupus, I know that there are, again, a few more vocal, well-known people who are diagnosed with the condition. Tiffany, tell me, has that been something that you think helps the cause to have this really element of fame behind a disease to promote awareness? Or does it kind of come out in a wash if those voices aren't really patients themselves, or perhaps do they detract from the actual people who are living with a disease?
For me personally, I think, I mean, there have been a lot of celebrities, especially this year, who have come out with having lupus. And a lot of people were really surprised, like, okay, they had no idea what it was. So I kind of feel like them speaking out about it kind of brings it to light for so many other people who don't even know what it is. I mean, I was in a chat like a couple of weeks ago. Some famous singer, his mom had lupus, and it wasn't him specifically, but he hosted a chat, where he actually spoke on it on behalf of his mother. So I kind of feel like, whether it's the person themselves who has the disease or not, just the fact that they're speaking up about it is bringing awareness to it specifically. And I mean, I don't feel like it's negative in any way for the lupus community. I think having these voices out there speaking on it pretty often brings it out into the public, and it's something that needs to happen, because there are still lots of people who don't know what it is. I mean, there are a lot of people who are saying that lupus specifically is not as rare anymore, but I mean, I meet people all the time who have no idea what it is. I had no idea what it was when I was diagnosed. So I think it's really important that these voices are speaking out, and I'm kind of happy that we actually have well-known celebrities, you could say, that are actually being vocal about it, because it's something that is kind of scary, to talk about, especially when you're on that kind of level of fame. You don't really want to disclose about your illness so publicly. But I think it's great that they're doing it, and it kind of sets an example for the rest of us that, hey, we can talk about this, it's okay. Let other people know, so that, we can know the warning signs and know how to treat it.
Britt, what do you think about this element of other people can talk about it, so it's okay that we do? Do you see this fame element that may play out on radio or TV or anything affecting diseases in a positive or negative way?
Well, I'm going to play devil's e-patient advocate here. You know, I have been really glad that more celebrities have been speaking up about their diseases, and specifically those who say have been musicians or something recently and have had to cancel tour dates and such, and cancel appearances, because that kind of explains a little bit or shows to the community you know, what they're actually going through, that it's severe enough that they are not able to keep on with their regular job, that's what this disease is. The problem for me is when we see those celebrities talking about the diseases and they've got perfect clothes, perfect hair and makeup, and it can be a misrepresentation of the disease as a whole, because what I hear a lot of times is, for instance, you know, in the arthritis community, Phil Mickelson is, you know, he has psoriatic arthritis, so I have a lot of people say to me, oh yeah, I've seen that commercial with Phil, you know, he's doing so great, you know, I bet you're doing just as good. And while it's good that he's getting it out there and that that's a face that people can kind of connect with and kind of rally around, at the same time, that becomes people's view of what that disease is. And, you know, I'm going to be the devil's advocate here and say that that could be really damaging at times too, because you know, that becomes what people understand of it. And they see, well, you just take the medication and then it's fine. And those people are able to carry on with their lives. And what is not discussed in some of those forums or settings is the severity or the multiple representations of that disease that could be possible for a patient. You know, they could be the best case scenario, they could be the worst case scenario. So, you know, I'm going to challenge all those celebrities out there, if God forbid they ever hear this out there, you know, to try to put a very realistic face out there, show those makeup-less selfies that happen sometimes, you know, and show those kind of tougher moments so that they put a clearer representation out there. But I am glad, like Tiffany said, to hear so many people speaking up, because it does help and shows that it is more prevalent, you know. So
I actually really like what you said, because I would love to see some of these celebrities who are dealing with some of the things of spending all night, sleeping on the bathroom floor, and, you know, having sick mornings and medication hangovers, and they call it, you know, the brain fog and the fatigue and these things that are so much an element of chronic illness that cannot be magically mitigated by some pill. And in that regard, Matthew, I would love for you to address this. How has a famous portrayal of Crohn's disease affected your community?
The portrayal that actually most people, in my experience, are familiar with is from those Humira advertisements. That's the touchstone that most people are familiar with inflammatory bowel diseases from. And those ads are the usually incredibly fit people from the model agency who have been told, you're going to go jogging and we're going to do it during golden hour and it's going to look really photogenic, and or it's those people who I think they actually used some models that a couple that also did a Levitra commercial, and that was incredibly weird for me. I'd really love to talk to AbbVie's marketing people and ask them what they are thinking, trying to make Crohn's sexy, I guess. I'm not sure that outside of I'm blanking on his name. Wow, Mike McCready. Many people have a sort of famous portrayal in mind. Increasingly, people will know someone or know someone who knows someone who has Crohn's, but the pop culture is really those Humira commercials, and that is so sad, just so sad.
Yeah, I love anytime I get a issue of the Stroke Connection magazine, which I know they're supposed to be, you know, these inspirational, uplifting stories, but and the person who's featured on the cover, yeah, just looks like they've never had a bad day in their life. And I admit that there is jealousy. There is jealousy for me in regards to these perfect portrayals, and there is jealousy for me in regards to diseases that do have some element of fame supporting them, because I want that. And I don't know if that makes me a bad person, but I want that. I want that for my disease. I want to not have to spell what I have to my doctors. And there were some comments that came through on Twitter that touch on this loosely, that it gets really difficult when we start comparing diseases, because we want to say, oh, there's the good disease and there's the bad disease, and that breast cancer may be the good cancer because it's what has all the support behind it. And that does the disease a huge disservice, because it's not like breast cancer itself is awesome to have. And so I don't know how we can, in any way, I don't know if we even should, mitigate this element of desire as a lesser recognized disease patient to get that kind of recognition, to have people care, to have people who know somebody who knows somebody who knows somebody have this thing. Because on one hand, if I wish for that, then I'm also wishing for a higher prevalence of my disease, which I don't want to do. You know, I certainly don't want to, you know, bless everybody with FMD. I'm not suggesting that. But we're running towards the end of our hour. I've really enjoyed this, but one thing that I do want to hit on before we go is this living in the public eye and having these diseases. And I mentioned breast cancer, and one of the most public cases lately has been with ePatient and advocate Lisa Adams, who was sharing about her disease, her diagnosis, and her eventual, note eventual, passing. Is, I mean, we all will pass. And that reporters in the community called her out for this sort of oversharing, that it was making them uncomfortable, that it was almost like a too much reality. And so as we think about that and think about how our words may affect others, how our words may affect specifically even other patients, what right, what duty do people in the public, whether they're non-patients or our fellow patients, have to comment on what we put out there, on what we share of ourselves? And Hugo, I'm actually going to have you answer this first. What have you gotten in response to what you've put out in the world?
Right. I think this is. I think we're fair game, right? Once you put stuff out there, you should be fair game for criticism sometimes. And when I started talking about the right of patients with implantable devices to gain access to the data, I got a lot of pushback from other patients who did not. It's funny that you would. It's the place that I would least expect pushback. Of course, I got pushback from all the other directions as well, but from patients, I never thought there would be a lot of people who'd say, "Oh, you should be grateful that you're protected against sudden death. Just shut up and be happy, and that you finally got the treatment that's going to save your life," and so on and so forth. And so, but it is, you know, it comes with the territory. And so I think what we need to do is I think when there is a dialogue, even if there is if there is a discussion, I think it's a positive thing. Today, I don't get as much of that pushback anymore, and so I think we're evolving the dialogue and we're evolving the conversation, and I think it's a positive thing.
And Nisha, how do you feel as an e-patient? Do you feel that being public about your diagnosis has made you fair game for public criticism?
Definitely. As someone who speaks for the anosmia community and for other e-patients of other conditions out there, I feel that being the very first one to do so has helped me a lot. It's also made me realize that I have to take responsibility for everything I say. I think that everyone has a responsibility in what they say, and I also feel that it's their decision in what they choose and do not choose to share. If that answers
Rachel,
your question.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And Rachel, how has it been for you living in the public eye, and has there been any negative response to that?
It's been interesting kind of moving into the public eye, like even just changing my Twitter name to my real name and that kind of thing. For the most part, it's been a fairly positive experience. I think, as with anything you put on social media, you are accountable for the things you put out there, and it is open to scrutiny, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. So far, I haven't encountered too much pushback, but I do think that pushback that we see with things like the Lisa Keller situation, I mean, they're bumps in the road, but they're also very important discussions to have. So, especially if we want to advance our cause further into the public eye. So.
And Tiffany, wrap us up a little bit here. Do you feel that being public about your condition has opened you to criticism, and do people have a right to make those comments?
When I was first diagnosed, a lot of people felt that I was letting my disease take over me. They're like, why are you calling yourself Tiffany and lupus? And I mean, I got a lot of negativity in the beginning, but I still, persevered and pushed on. And for me, it was about just being honest with myself and with everyone else out there. Like, you don't have to be afraid of having this illness. You can speak up about it. There will be people who don't understand, and you will get some negativity, but overall, I think we need to understand that putting ourselves out there reaches out to all those out there who are listening. There are so many people who are listening that are not really speaking, and if our voices, become quiet because we're afraid of, the scrutiny, then how can we help them? So I kind of feel like it's important for us to push past that and to keep sharing our stories and to keep, connecting with others online about our health, because overall, we're helping others, and that's really all that matters.
Thank you so much. And a huge thank you to all of our panel. Some of you may have noticed that we lost Robert West a bit between our questions here, who fortunately Robert suffered a power outage and was not able to join us again, but we thank him for his participation. And so much love to our panel, who we're going to be able to continue a lot of these conversations in real life, as they say, IRL, which a nice little shout out to Pam Ressler, who will be at MedX with us this September. And we hope that more of you are able to join us. Don't forget to go to medicinex.stanford.edu to check out all the accepted presentations, and schedules will be posted soon, and sign up and register, and we look forward to seeing you there. We will be back here again next Tuesday, same time, same place, different faces. Have a wonderful evening.
Thanks so much for joining us tonight for this episode of Stanford Medicine X Live. We'll see you back here on June 24th at 5:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time for another edition of Stanford Medicine X Live on the topic Rethinking Primary Care. You won't want to miss the next episode of Stanford Medicine X Live. As a reminder, this program is made possible by support from the Stanford University School of Medicine, Department of Anesthesia, Stanford AIM Lab, Stanford Hospital and Clinics, and the Agency for Healthcare Research Quality. If you haven't yet done so, please take a moment to follow our YouTube page at www.youtube.com/StanfordMedX so you can continue the conversation online and stay informed of program updates. From all of us here at Stanford Medicine X, we want to thank you for joining us today and for being part of the conversation. Don't forget that registration for Medicine X 2014 is now open. Don't miss the year's premier patient-centered conference on emerging technology and medicine. Unique opportunities such as our masterclass program and our IDEO Design Challenge workshop have extremely limited space availability. You'll want to take advantage of these programs while our regular registration pricing is still available until August 1st, 2014. A special thanks to our guest panelists this evening. From all of us at Stanford Medicine X, we'll see you next time.